David Milch.
Hi, I'm Nancy Harrington, and I'm interviewing Ed O'Neill on behalf of the Archive of American Television on April 3rd, 2013, at the Montage Hotel in Beverly Hills, California. So we'd like to start by taking about 10 minutes to get some early background information. So what was your name at birth?
Edward Leonard O'Neill, 2 L's.
And when and where were you born?
Youngstown, Ohio, April 12th, 1946, St. Elizabeth's Hospital.
Did you grow up in Youngstown?
I did.
And what were your parents' names, and what did they do for a living?
My father was Edward Philip O'Neill. He was a steel worker. My mother was Ruth Ann Quinlan, housewife, for the most part, in the early years. Mm-hmm. And she became a social worker later on.
And what traits do you think you inherited from them?
All the bad ones. No, just probably a little bit of both, you know. I mean, my father was a pretty straight-ahead guy, hard worker. My mother was a little neurotic and political, although I'm not that political, but a little hysterical.
Was there humor in your household?
Oh, yes. Yes. I'm the oldest of 5, by the way.
So how many who are your siblings?
2 brothers and 2 sisters.
And what were your interests growing up?
Sports, you know, baseball, football, music. I liked music at a young age, like 10. Just chasing around the neighborhood with my friends, you know.
Did you watch a lot of TV?
We didn't have TV for a while when I was, I'm trying to think when TV came in for me. Because we didn't get the first batch, you know. But it was probably around 10 or 12, I guess, or maybe even, yeah, 10, around 10 probably.
Do you remember what shows you watched?
No. I think I watched football, and that was like an amazing thing to me. And it was black and white. So no, there wasn't a lot of TV watching when I was a boy.
How about later? When did you start getting
I
interested?
remember watching the comedies, you know, Sid Caesar, Phil Silvers, the Bilko Show, Jackie Gleason, The Honeymooners, I Love Lucy, those shows I really liked. Jack Benny, you know. And then I liked the Three Stooges. No, I'm sorry. I liked Laurel and Hardy. I didn't like the Three Stooges. I thought they were silly, slapping each other and all that stuff, you know. So I loved Laurel and Hardy, though.
Did you do any performing when you were younger?
Only in my little school plays, you know, the first grade. So I was a shepherd, you know, and I was something else. But it was just, you know, it was just like stuff that they made you do, basically.
Where'd you go to high school?
Ursuline, which was a Catholic school. At one time it had been an all-girls school, but that had changed probably 15 years before I went there. So my mother went there.
And what did you do after you graduated from high school?
I went to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, as a freshman to play football. And that lasted about a year and a half. And then I went back to Youngstown. And then I went into their university, Youngstown State University. And I played football there a couple more years. And that was basically all I did, was play football and, you know, goof around. I mean, I was in school, but I didn't have any real desire to go to college.
And when did you decide you wanted to get into acting?
You know, it was after. I had a tryout with the Pittsburgh Steelers in '69, Chuck Noll's first year, and didn't make the team, but then went to Florida for a while. I thought I'd go to Florida with a friend of mine who had pitched for the Pirates, a guy named Sammy Angot, whose dad was actually in the Boxing Hall of Fame, Sammy Angot, lightweight. So we were in Florida for about 6 months, Fort Lauderdale. I was bellhopping in a hotel, you know. It was fun. And then came back to Youngstown, and then I don't remember what I was doing. I wasn't doing much. I got into, I must have seen some sort of ad in the paper for a play at the Youngstown Playhouse. And I went out there and auditioned for it, and I was horrible. I can remember that, just horrible. I think it was The Rainmaker, because I had seen the movie. That's what gave me the idea to go out there. Burt Lancaster. And I think I tried to do an imitation of Burt Lancaster. It was just, I wish I had a film of it, but. And then the next time I went out again for Cuckoo's Nest, because again I had read the book. The movie hadn't been done yet, and I was horrible. But this director, you know, they didn't have a lot of guys like me going out there. Most of the men at the Youngstown Playhouse were gay, so they liked the opportunity to get a guy like me, you know, because there were not many guys like me. They didn't know I was gay, and no. Anyway, that's how I started. I started doing smaller roles, you know, and then I eventually got down to the university where I told the artistic director down there that I was an actor. You know, I think I had held a spear in a little play at the Youngstown Playhouse, Antigone. And so I got into the acting class there, and then again I was horrible. And but then I just kept at it. I liked it.
What attracted you to it?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It was a sort of way to express something, and I had always gone to the movies as a boy, so I enjoyed, you know, movies. And I can remember telling my friends about movies they hadn't seen, and then if they went to see the movie, they may say, well, it wasn't as good as the one you told me about. So I seem to have this ability to, you know, tell stories. And I had uncles that were good at that. I had 3 uncles by marriage. You know, my mother, she was one of 4 girls. And these guys who married into the family were very funny guys and wonderful storytellers. So that's how I began listening to them at parties, you know, and maybe that's how I came by that.
What was your first professional acting gig?
The first time I got paid was in New York City, and it was a Broadway play. It was a play called Knockout at the Helen Hayes Theater, and it was written by Lou LaRusso from Hoboken, and it was directed by Frank Corsaro, who was an actor studio guy and did opera later on, or he had been doing opera as a matter of fact. But that was at the Helen Hayes Theater.
And you had moved to New York by that point when
Yeah.
you started to do that? So talk a little bit about your experience in Circle in the Square Theater.
Well, I don't have much. That's kind of what that was all about. When I was in Youngstown, I was trying to figure out a way to get to New York, and I had heard about the Circle in the Square, and I thought, well, that sounds like a good thing to, you know. And I got an audition with them. So I went up to New York and I auditioned. You had to do 2 monologues. It was a very, you know, simple thing, but one classical and one contemporary. And anyway, I got accepted in the school. But then I realized you have to pay them. You know? And I had already done maybe 15 plays. And I thought, well, now, wait a minute. There's fencing. There's ballet. You know, I don't want to do this. So I never went. That was it.
That's great. So how were you honing your craft at the time?
Well, at the time, I was doing plays in the Youngstown area. And so when I went to New York, I was already 32 years old, or 31 anyway. So I thought, I better get a move on here. I can't go to school anymore, you know, for this. So I I tried to figure out the best off-Broadway theater houses, because there's so many. But I figured, well, there's got to be a few select ones where the casting people actually go, instead of someplace in Jersey, where they never go. So I found I had like maybe 10. So I focused on those places, Soho, Rep, a few places like that. And so that's where I started doing some plays. And then that's how I started to get noticed a bit.
So what did your role in Knockout do for your career?
Well, that really got me going. I mean, that was the beginning of the whole thing, because the play got bad reviews, but I got a good review. And I think what happened there was that it was Richard, who was the guy that critiqued it? Richard Eder, who could be a pretty tough guy. And he took the star to task, and the writer, and everybody. And then I think he thought, well, now I need one bright spot, to round this thing out. So he picked me, because I was the villain, and so he gave me a good review. And so that was fortunate. And then that got me, around to agents, and then the whole thing started to. I think I ended up signing with ICM.
And at what point did you move to LA?
Well, I moved to LA after I got married with children, which was in '86.
So were you going back and forth?
Well, so yeah, I had an apartment in the Village on Morton Street, and I kept it for like you do, 2 or 3 years after I was already living out here and working out here, because my intention was always to go back, and then after that I figured, well, I'm not going back, and if I do, it won't be to that place.
So how did you get the role on Another World in 1981?
Oh my God. I don't remember how I got the role. I mean, I know I had to audition for it, for sure. No, wait, maybe I didn't. I didn't. You didn't audition for soap operas. I mean, I think I had done a few by then, and then that was in Brooklyn. I used to have a shuttle that would take you out there, pick you up on they had different pickup spots. And this one, I think, was 72nd and Amsterdam or something. But I started out, always the bad guy, and you'd ride out on this shuttle, and it was so funny because the things I remember about that shuttle ride, we would share it with the regulars. And I didn't watch any soap operas. I didn't know these people, but the conversations were strange, because they'd be talking about the price of gold, for example, or silver, and stock market, and I'd be sitting next to another actor who we weren't contract guys. We weren't talking about those kinds of things. So I thought, yeah, they must be making money on this show. But I did that show for a while. I mean, that sort of kept going for a while, because I ended up kidnapping the entire show, and holding everybody ransom. And I think I played a guy named, I forget the name I played.
I think he was called Lenny.
Lenny, that's right. I played a villain on another one called Mr. Stubbs.
What was your opinion of soap operas at the time? You said you didn't watch them.
Well, I mean, I always thought that they were ridiculous, I mean, in the sense that you couldn't see. I was under the misconception that you could actually do some interesting acting on them, but I wasn't aware of how they shoot them. There's no way you can do anything in those things. They cut off you. They go to the lead actor who's got his eyebrow up, and then you're not on camera. And so I soon realized that, oh, this is what this is. Okay. But it was a wonderful job, because it was like a flat fee of $500 a day or something, And so if you worked 4 days that week, you were in pretty good shape.
Tell us a little bit about the process of shooting a soap, how it works on sort of a daily basis.
Well, I haven't done one in so long, but, it was an all-day thing usually, and not always, but I think you got the pages when you arrived. I mean, there wasn't anything like you took it home and learned it, or you had to be pretty good at doing it because you didn't want to hold up the contract players who had more work. So you wanted to kind of just stay out of the way, and not cause problems and not take too much time. And that was big. If you could do that, that didn't matter if you were a good actor. It was like, well, he's fast. But you'd rehearse it. You'd go in and you'd rehearse. They'd block it. You'd rehearse it very briefly. And then you'd go to makeup and hair, and then you'd wait to be called in and you'd shoot it. But it wasn't hard, really. It was sometimes funny because, in some actors who were theater actors, for example, didn't like the process because there was no rehearsal. They weren't sure of their lines, for example, and they would get panicky. And then under the pressure of having to do it and do it quickly, you'd see some very funny results sometimes.
So how did that experience help your career?
Well, it was money. It was money, and I don't know. I just kind of maybe got a little sense that I could do it, that I could work in front of a camera, for example, and there's nothing to it really. It's just that although some actors like to know where it is, like where are you on me, and I always tried to ignore it. Although sometimes there is as you go down the line, like movies, for example, sometimes you want to know when they're tight because, you do a little more intimate work if they're tight, if the scene calls for it. But it's not that much.
And then in the early 80s, you were considered for a couple of pretty high-profile roles on TV, Sam Malone on Cheers and Stephen Keaton on Family Ties.
Yes.
So what was the audition process you went through for those kind of roles?
Well, Cheers, originally, Sam Malone was an ex-football player, which made more sense to me because there's a different kind of relationship between an ex-football player and his coach than there is between a baseball player and his coach. I'm not sure what that is, but I know it's different. A little more father-like with the football. The baseball is a little bit more of an equal kind of a thing, for some funny reason. But they changed that, and I don't know why they did, because Ted Danson could have easily played either one, football or baseball. And I love the actor that played the coach. That guy was a wonderful actor. I'm blocking on his name, but I've seen him in so many things. He was also in Raging Bull. He played the gangster so great. And he was in a boxing movie too. It was great with Stacy Keach. Anyway.
Nicholas Calliston.
Nick. No, wait. Nick.
Oh, yeah.
Colasanto. Is that his name? Is that what it was? What was the boxing movie he did though with Stacy Keach that was so good? And I, it's a wonderful book. Can't think of it. Anyway, he was a wonderful actor. The other thing, the other part,
Stephen Keaton.
Yes, I told him I wasn't right.
Really?
Yeah.
How come?
I didn't feel that I was right for the role, and I think I actually mentioned the actor who got it to them because I used to do Another World with him. He was the guy sitting next to me in the van going out. And I'm blocking on his name,
Blocking on his name.
Michael Gross. Oh my God, I had so much fun with him on a movie that I did. It was a horrible movie with Raquel Welch. Oh, Jesus God. Based on a true story. And he was playing the husband, and she was playing a high-powered attorney who was dying of some dread disease slowly. And this was based on a true story. And I played Michael's business partner. And she had the idea to call all her friends in and have a party, the end of which she was going to repair to the bedroom and kill herself. And we all knew this. This was part of the invitation. This was apparently a true story. And so everyone had to then go in individually and say goodbye to her. And it was just a hilarious kind of a thing, because I remember going to the director and saying, listen, you know, I really didn't know her well. I work with the husband, don't really know her, so it wouldn't be that emotional for me, because I didn't want to do it. And Michael ended up crying throughout the entire movie. And he would say to me, I'm crying a lot. I'm wondering, I said, you are crying a lot, Michael. Do you think they'll edit? I said, no, I think it'll all be in. And it was. But I remember shooting the scene with Raquel where I come in to say goodbye. And I forget how I played it, but I played it like uncomfortable, you know, which I was. And she was like looking at me with one eye open, you know, no, because everyone else was sobbing. And after they said cut, she turned to the director and said, well, I'm glad that I didn't know this one so well. You know? Anyway, went off track, but...
That's okay. It was worth it.
Oh, my God.
So in 1982, you were cast in a pilot for Farrell for the People.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Valerie Harper, who's in the news today, unfortunately. Yeah, I should call her. I auditioned for that. That was a pilot for a series for, I think, NBC. And Gregory Sierra was in that. Remember him from Sanford and Son? And we were partners. We were two cops. I mean, it was kind of ridiculous, you know. It was. I mean, she was a prosecutor or something, and we played these two cops that were like, we helped her out in a lot of cases, and I played this ridiculous, stupid cop. But, you know, again, it was one of those things where, okay, this may be a series, and, you know, I was living in New York at the time, and I overacted. I mean, I couldn't watch it today. There's lots of things I can't watch today that I did. That was one of them, for sure. Nothing wrong with her or anybody but me, you know. I just thought, why didn't somebody stop me, you know? So that was, you know, and that was one of those things where I was actually hoping it would be picked up so I could improve on the performance in the first show. But thank God it wasn't.
In the early 80s, you were in did a lot of one-off appearances on shows like Miami Vice and Spencer for Hire. What types of characters were you playing at that point?
Usually always bad guys, you know. I mean, I played... Spencer for Hire was kind of fun. I played a Portuguese fisherman who was a bully. And I thought, Portuguese? But, you know, interestingly enough, when I got up there, because we shot on location north of Boston, Robert Urich, a lot of those guys did look like me. I mean, not, you know, I mean, light complected. They weren't dark and swarthy. They were Portugal. You know, that surprised me. I wasn't aware of that. And he was a lovely guy. I mean, we were both from Ohio, which I didn't know. He didn't know that I was either. We got along great. I showed him how to throw a punch. He didn't know how to punch. He had to beat me up in the show, you know. And I remember we rehearsed it, and by this time I knew him a little better, you know. And we were getting along, and I said, "Is that how you're going to do it?" Why? Because he had a guy there showing him how to, but the guy himself didn't know how to throw punches. So I showed him how to throw a couple of punches. I remember he got a kick out of it.
Did you have an agent at the time?
I did, yeah. I was with ICM almost from the beginning. I'm still with them.
And were you being called in for a lot of auditions around that point?
I was and I wasn't. I mean, I was doing plays, for example. I was more or less a theater actor at that time. just a little before I started doing a lot of the TV stuff. But I was trying to break into movies, you know, and I had done one with Pacino. It was a Bill Friedkin. It was a very controversial film called Cruising. And I played a plainclothes detective. And then I did a movie with Chris Walken and Tom Berenger called The Dogs of War, which was not a bad film. And then I kind of stalled out. I was doing plays. And I had this agent named Paul Martino at ICM, who was a pretty big shot agent with them. And there were a pretty long period of time where I never heard a thing from him. And so one day I was working out at the West Side Y on West 63rd, and I saw Paul. Paul used to go before work and run on that track over the, you know, it was an elevated track over the gym. And because he had a little bit of a weight problem, so he would run and run and run and starve himself and run and run and run, you know. So I stopped him, and I said, Paul, do you have a second? I hadn't talked to him in 6 months. Ed, you know, Jesus, I'm running and I'm late. I said, I just need a moment, Paul. I said, you know, the thing is, I haven't spoken to you. I left a couple messages. Oh, my God. Well, here's the thing. I like to receive phone calls, Mr. O'Neill. I don't like to make them. I said, and that means, well, Maureen Stapleton. They call and say, what's Maureen doing? You know, I like that. I don't like saying, you know, I have this guy, he's pretty good, you know. And I'm thinking, if I just shoved him just a little, he'd go over the railing and he'd land on the gym floor. So I said, well then, Paul, I guess we're through. I suppose. You're really good. I'm building a house in Cape Cod. Did you know that? So I got another agent. And I remember another time with him, and I should have known then, this other incident. He said, Oliver Stone, do you know who he is? And I said, yeah, I think I do. Well, he's doing a war movie. It's awful. It's called Platoon. And he'd like to see you. I said, well, where does he know me from? He doesn't, Ed. He just will see you. So I went over there, and the address was an apartment, which was very unusual. I thought, I got to the wrong place. And I rang the bell, and I hear this Jewish woman, you know, yes. And Oliver Stone, yes. Buzz, I go in. It's his mother. This is true. I go in. Darling, would you like some tea? You know, and he'll be right out. So he comes out, and it's his mother's apartment. And I had read the script, and I didn't think it was very good. It was kind of like a B worst movie, you know? And so anyway, he was very nice. And we're talking, he moving his offices to California that week, and you look like a guy that could be in a war movie, you know? I said, did you like the script? I said, oh yeah, it's good, you know, I lied. And what role would you be interested in? I said, well, I like Barnes. And he just looked at me and he said, Barnes? It's the starring role. I said, well, you asked me. You know, the guy with the scar. Tom Berenger ended up doing a marvelous job with it. He said, it's the fucking starring role in the movie. I'm not giving you the starring role. I don't even know you. So the upshot of that meeting was he said, just, you know, tell your agent to send your stuff to my office in California. And I'll find something for you in the movie. Okay. I run down out of the thing. I'm very excited. I call Paul Martino. I tell him about the thing. And he said, oh, he's nuts. I said, what? Ed, he just likes to talk to actors. And I said, but you sent me over there. He's with us. Now, I honestly don't think Oliver Stone was nuts. I think Paul Martino was nuts. But I said, but he wants my stuff. Oh, Ed, it's darling. So That should have told me something right there, you know, but it was the other incident then on the track that got me off Paul. I still see Paul sometimes. Oh, I should have shut this off. And, you know, I kind of laugh about it. Danny Stearns almost killed him one day in the office when it got him by the neck over not responding about something. And he did say that thing about, these blueprints, I'm a garden in the Cape and I'm preoccupied, Dan. But you see, these things happen in this business. It's a very strange agent-client. So I had a lot of those.
What was your audition process when you get called in for an audition?
Well, it would vary, you know. I mean, some of them were in front of these little cameras, which I eventually refused to do because they're so flat, you know. You can't ever look good. Theater auditions are a bit different. I auditioned a lot in New York, and I got to a point where I actually kind of liked it. I wouldn't now, you know, because I haven't done it for so long. But you can learn a lot, you know. I mean, there's ways of doing these things that I learned. For example, when I would go into a room, and there would always be more than one person. There'd be maybe 3 or 4. The writer, the director, the person you're reading with, you know, maybe somebody else. And I would say, and I would be friendly, but not too friendly. I don't think they like that. You know, they all have the gig, you don't. So, you know, they may never see you again. And so, a little chit-chat. And then they would say, should we start? And you always had pages, you know. And I would say, sure, okay. First scene is page 24. Yes. Okay. Any questions? Not really. Okay. The reader has the first line, for example, to start the scene. I would always say, can I have a moment? They would always say, yes, of course. And then I would take the pages and I would just stare at them for maybe 20 seconds. And this accomplishes a couple of things. Number one, it calms them down. It gets them focused, and they can look at you. And you don't have to look at them, but they look at you, and now they can say, well, gee, I wonder if he's right for this. And also, they believe you're more serious, like you're an actual artist or something. You can be thinking about what you need at the store, or where you're going to meet somebody afterwards. It doesn't make any difference, you know. It's just that quiet. And then I would look up at the person and I would go, and then they would start. And then the scene would play. So that was always a good thing for me, you know, instead of starting right into it. And it takes them a while. It's jarring. So yeah, I used to do a lot of auditioning.
In 1986, you were cast in the pilot of the Popeye Doyle show. So what was it like trying to adapt that iconic character of Gene Hackman's?
Well, that was another horrible, I mean, that was a thing where I really went after that role. I love the movie, and Gene Hackman is maybe my favorite actor. I mean, he's not my favorite. He's right up there, top 3.
Who are the other 2?
Well, Brando, and then I don't know who would be in there. Character, I could substitute 10, you know. Robert Shaw, Frederick March, Lloyd Nolan, a lot of guys. But certainly Hackman. So when I had this opportunity, I thought, well, the screenplay's not that great. It's certainly not the movie. But I went out, I went to 42nd Street and I bought this outfit, you know, I got the pork pie hat and so I went in and I got the part. And Bob Singer was the producer, who's a lovely guy, and we're still friends. And I'm trying to think who directed it. I know him too. I've done a couple things for him.
Peter Levin.
Peter Levin. Jeez, Peter, great guy. the script didn't really even make sense. I remember going to Bob Singer and saying, Bob, you know, this part, it doesn't make sense. He said, don't worry about it. It's a TV movie, you know. I mean, it was a pilot. There's a scene in the movie, I swear to God, where the killer is stalking me, and I'm hiding because I'm wounded. And you hear the foot click, click. It's on a concrete floor. Click, click, click. And they cut to the killer's feet. He's wearing tennis shoes. It's impossible to make that sound. He's got cleats on the bottom of tennis shoes. And I said, they edited this. Well, you know. And then again, you know, I mean, I'm have a tendency to be hard on myself, but I think, honestly, it's correct that that's another one of those things that I cannot watch. And but I wasn't concerned about the Hackman thing because I needed to pay rent, so I did it, and I'm not sorry because, you know, I needed the money, but it wasn't great, for sure.
And then in 1986, you starred in the play Mice and Men.
Yeah.
So how did that lead to Married with Children?
That is an interesting thing. That a friend of mine knew this director who was a woman. Who directed Mice and Men? Does it say? Pam?
No.
Pam? Okay. She was very good. Anyway, this friend of mine suggested me for the part to her. And then called me and said, you know, it's Hartford Stage and it's Mice and Men. And I said, I don't want to do Mice and Men. I saw that movie with Burgess Meredith and Lon Chaney. It's corny. The guy is just a retard from hell, and I don't want to do it. Dated, you know. And he said, well, you know, she'd really like to see you. And long story short, I went in very reluctantly, and I met her, and I thought it was just going to be a little meeting. And she said, well, could you know, we read a couple scenes, and I did this audition, which was horrific. I didn't do anything. I was embarrassed. So then I left, and when I left, it was such a bad feeling because she was so let down that it was so bad. And about 2 weeks later, she called me on the phone, and she said, listen, your audition was horrible. You know that. I said, yes, I know it was horrible. And she said, well, I just have a feeling you can do it, and I can't find anybody to do it. And then I thought, I think it was a period of time where I needed money again. You know, I was like, and they only paid like $400 a week at Hartford Stage, but it was money. So I said, okay, I'll do it, and I'll meet you up there on the train. So I thought, how the fuck am I going to do this thing? So I went up there, and I remember the rehearsal, and they had a wonderful cast around Lenny. And in the early rehearsals, I can remember just sitting on the floor, watching, mumbling. It was awful. And then somehow it started to come to me, something. I don't know what it was. That's the fun of it, though. Sometimes it was probably one of the greatest performances I've ever given, and as it turned out. And so that was a very good thing. And it broke the records for attendance. It broke, you know, got reviews like you could not even make them up. They were so good. And so that was a great experience.
And so after that, you were cast in Married with Children.
What happened then was that one of the guys that came to the play, because it had a great word of mouth. It was a phenomenal play. This guy was a casting director, and he was visiting his grandmother in Hartford. He was casting Married with Children, and they couldn't find the Al Bundy character. And how he would put the two together, you know, I don't know. He said later, his name was Mark Hirschfeld, sweet guy. He went to Levitt and Moyer, who created the show, and they had seen everybody. John Goodman, I mean, wonderful actors, Sam Kinison, you know. But they just couldn't find the match with a girl with the, you know, they had Roseanne Barr, who basically said, "This ain't mine. This is the guy." So he had seen Mice and Men, and he said, "Look, there's this actor in New York. You know, he's not a comedic actor. He's a serious actor." He said, "Oh, great!" But they were desperate. So I remember I was in L.A. I was out there for something else that never went, and I was there for like 3 or 4 days, and I was playing handball at the Hollywood Y. I used to play handball. And I get a call from my agent saying, "Look, there's this horrible show on this new network, Fox." I said, "Fox? They make movies, 20th Century Fox." "No, they're going to be in the television business. But they'd like to see you on this horrible project called Married with Children." I said, "Well, I'm playing handball. Where is it?" "Well, it's actually right across the street. It's Sunset Gower. You know, the Hollywood Y is very close." I said, "Well, we'll bring a script over there and just read it. It'll take you 10 minutes. It's, you know, it's a pilot, half hour." So I read it, and I thought, this is pretty funny. You know, I mean, I remember thinking, it's kind of funny. It's crazy, but... And I went over there, and I went in the office, and Levitt and Moyer were in their office, and these guys looked like gas station attendants. They did. Guys that would change your oil. And they were throwing darts. You know how writers are. The room was a mess. Empty Coca-Cola, and, you know, ding-dongs, and they were eating this cupcakes. And I came in with my gym bag with like 20 pairs of sweaty handball gloves hanging from the bag, because you'd air them out. You know, you had to change your gloves all the time when you played handball. And I remember Moyer and Levitt said, where are all the gloves, you know? So now I said, you know, I think it's kind of funny, guys. I mean, really, all my agents hate it. But I think it's kind of funny. Well, we think it's funny. Would you read a couple things with... And I said, sure, because I was so used to auditioning. Now, the role, the part of Al Bundy reminded me of one of my uncles that I mentioned earlier. And he was actually a judge. Was a very bright guy. But he had this self-deprecating sense of humor. In other words, his wife was an alcoholic, my aunt, Curly, nicknamed Curly. And this actually happened. He came home from work, from the judge chambers, and he walked in the house and he said, "Hi, Curl, you know, what's for dinner?" She said, "I ran over the dog today. It's dead." And he said, "Well, what's for dinner?" See, he was used to it. So it didn't upset him. It was his dog. "He's dead, Joe." So that's how I read it. Now, ironically, nobody read it that way, you know, because everybody who saw it before, and I only had 20 minutes with it. I might have come to that other way, you know, had I had more time. But they did it like Jackie Gleason, you know, yelling and always angry. And I just did it like, so what, you know, what else was new? They hadn't heard that, and they liked it. So that's how the ball got rolling for me in that.
And how was the show described to you?
Awful. You know, they basically said, look, this will probably have, you'll shoot 6, 3 will air, and they'll cancel it. And I said, well, that's okay. That's Christmas. You know. And I swear to God, when I flew back to New York, because at the time I was in the Village, the agent called, and I passed. They wanted me to fly right back out, you know, for the network. And I said, I'm not going back out. It's snowing, it's Christmas, And then this agent called from ICM from the office in California, and he said, listen, you know, a wonderful guy whose name I'm blocking on now, too, and actually a friend of mine, Alan Greenspan. And he said, you're their number 1 choice at the moment. You know, they're seeing several people, but you're the guy that they're talking about. And I said, what do they want to pay me for this? And he said, well, it's $10,000 a week. It was something like that. $10,000 a show, which was very little. I mean, it was the minimum, right? Although that sounds a lot to some people. And kind of to me then, at that time. And I said, well, can I get $12,500? He He said, Ed, let's not fuck with this thing now. You know, if you... I said, no, just tell him I'll come back out for 12.5. Hung up. Called back in 30 seconds. Yeah. This means nothing, by the way. You got to get the part. You know, there's no 12.5 if you don't get the part. So I went back out, and that's when I met Katie Seagal. You know, they were mixing and matching actors, as they do, you know. And I remember that we seemed to hit it off pretty well, you know. And then what I learned later was that Barry Diller from Fox went to Moya and Lovett and said, well, you've got the girl, but I think you can do a lot better than the guy. And they apparently said, well, you know, we're down to the wire here, Barry, and we kind of like him for the part. He said, well, it's your funeral. It's a lovely business, you know. And so that's how I got it. Basically by default, you know, because I wasn't a comedic actor. And they were taking a big chance, you know. But they just liked that laconic kind of reading. And they knew I could act because I had done all these plays. And I don't know, that's how it happened.
So tell us about the first time you met Katie.
I had seen her on something where she was a cigarette smoking. It might have been Mary Tyler Moore. She was like this cigarette smoking secretary with the hair, and you know. So I thought, well, she's funny. You know, she's pretty funny, and she was very good. In you know, the two of us played off each other pretty well. And then I think I knew that she had been a harlot with Bette Midler. So I thought, well, this girl's, you know, this would work, you know. And we still talk all the time, you know. Katie and I are very good. In fact, I'm presenting an award to her next month.
Where?
Some award someplace, you know, Beverly Hills for something.
So tell us the premise of Married with Children and where and when it was set.
Well, the idea of it, as I was told, was that it was the original title was "We're Not the Cosbys," and it was Levitt and Moya wanting to write something that was, you know, not like your standard sitcom family where the father's right and the mother's right and the kids are pretty good. Always the friends were the problems, you know, on those sitcoms. So they said, what if we did a show where we did it about those friends? And that was the major, you know, the father was not a good father, the mother was not interested, the kids were, you know, it was dysfunctional. And that was their idea.
So what did you think of the concept of that show when you heard it?
I thought it was good. You know, I thought it was interesting. You know, it was different. And I didn't know where it was going to go. Obviously, I didn't think it was going to last too long. And, yeah, I mean, we were making fun of midgets and fat women, and I thought, oh, this will never fly. Never. 11 years later, you know.
Why do you think it did?
Well, it was funny. You know, people found it funny. Even if they thought, oh, my God, that's awful, they were laughing. Most people, not everybody, by the way. And it certainly wasn't everybody's cup of tea. And a lot of it was, for example, I personally hate bathroom humor. All my life I've hated it. So whenever that would come into the show, I would always try to get rid of it, you know, just because I didn't like it. And so they didn't put a whole lot, but there was some of it. You know, it was crude. And it was designed to be crude, and it was designed to get right on that line, and sometimes we went over because you don't know you're over till you're over, you know. But Levitt and Moya, 11 years of working with them, never a crossword, you know. They were sweet guys. We had so many laughs on that show in the rehearsal and you know. And the first 3 years of that show, I would put that show up against anybody for just funny. We had most of the people from Saturday Night Live, the writers. We had quite a few gals writing on the show who were hysterical, and it was funny. You know, over time it got a problem, you know, because we Levitt Moyer split up, and we got other people running the show who, by the way, most people were under the impression that that was an easy show to write. That was a very hard show to write. And it was difficult. And people thought it wasn't, and so they would get in big trouble. You know, they would, isn't this funny? No, not funny now. For example, if I made fun of a fat woman in the shoe store, it could never be my idea. I couldn't just start insulting them. It had to be out of desperation, like a defensive, get off me kind of thing, you know, where they would be horrendous customers. And if it wasn't that, then it didn't work. So there was a lot of things in the show you had to be careful of. He could never enjoy himself too much, because after all, his life was basically a sentence. After high school, he was a big star, and then it was all downhill. But he persevered. So there was a certain kind of nobility to underneath it all, you know, that he loved them in some way and was loyal.
Is Ed O'Neill at all like Al Bundy?
Oh, yeah.
In what way?
Well, first of all, I'm from, you know, the Midwest. This took place in Chicago. Blue collar, you know, lower middle class. That's pushing it. A self-deprecating sense of humor. And just, you know, there were a lot of things that I found relatable and funny. That's why I did it. I mean, you know, that's why I enjoyed doing it. Because it was just, you know, I came from a family that had a kind of a mean sense of humor. Dark Irish, you know, gallows humor.
Tell us a little bit about shooting the pilot.
Well, when we shot the pilot, we had 2 different kids. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kit Carson's grandson or something, and then this lovely girl that played Kelly. And but they shot it in a way, because apparently the producers were concerned about the kids. They weren't happy. We didn't know that shooting the pilot. I kind of sensed it. So they shot it in such a way that they could lift them out of it and reshoot the others in it and never miss a beat, which is what they ended up doing. So the pilot went pretty well. It was more realistic than the show eventually evolved or devolved. It was much more realistic if you watch it, a little bit more straight up, almost not drama, but, you know, it was not silly or, you know, big. And the audience seemed to like it. There were some very funny jokes in it, you know, and I think I was nervous when I did it for a while, and but I thought it went well.
So let's talk a little bit more about Al. Did you have input into him?
No, I mean, in the sense that as they got to know me, they would use the football, for example. They knew I had a football background, so they you know, made that part of the character. The 4 touchdowns in one game. I never scored 4 touchdowns in one game in my life, but you know, they used the football idea, and I think they were just smart writers. You know, and all writers do this, by the way. After a show starts running, they start to use what they can from each character in it, and they try to play off the strengths and stay away from the weaknesses.
So what were his strengths and weaknesses?
Well, like thematically, you know, I mean, I think that Al, you know, whenever tax time would come or bills would come in, for example, and he would be figuring out or seeing where the money was going, you know, that sort of thing I love to play, because that's a sort of a frustration that is, you know, very common. And just the idea that his life is not anywhere near what he was hoping it would be. Any situation like that, and he could laugh in a way that's not really happy. Those things I like to play. I love playing the scenes where I was trying to teach my kids something and didn't have a clue as to do it, how to do it. You know, I mean, I remember one time when Kelly wanted to talk to me about menstruation. You know, she said, "Daddy," you know, and I'd say, "Walk it off," which is a very funny line. Or when Bud was going out for his bowling team, they needed him to substitute for somebody, and then he didn't want to do it because he was a lousy bowler. And then Al starts to tell him how disappointed he really was in him athletically, how he didn't make the Little League, and I was ashamed of you. I mean, these things, it was the worst possible thing a parent could say to a person, a son. But it was very funny. I like doing that stuff.
How did Al evolve over the course of the show?
Well, he never evolved, and that's the point. That he never evolved, as my father never evolved. I don't believe it. You know, from the time I remember him till the time he died at 89, he was the same guy. And that was the point, that there was no evolving here.
Tell us how you came up with his stance and his walk.
Oh my God, I don't remember how that happened. I mean, that evolved or devolved. I mean, it was the hand down the pants, for example. I'm not even sure. I think it was me. I wouldn't swear to it. I think it was me though, because it was a resting place, and I was on that couch so much. Somehow I got doing that, and they liked it. It wasn't all the way down, you know, it was just in the belt, you know, but people found it funny. They found it funny. And, you know, like, let's rock. You know, that's almost, you still hear people say that. I don't know if they know where it comes from. There were certain things that we said that it's still, you know, they're still in the culture.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to stop there and change.